Hey everyone, it's Alexander the Real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel. And it's been a while since I've actually done a ranking video. The last one I did was for the entire DC Extended Universe on the original release date of Wonder Woman 1984. And again, it's been a while since I've done one of those videos, but with this franchise, I feel like there's no better time than now to rank them. I'm currently in the middle of a watch-along for the entire Godzilla franchise. Tomorrow will be the 2014 film. But I wanted to take a break from Godzilla and highlight the monster that's always been in his shadows, Gamera. On Twitter, I announced that I'd be doing a Gamera-related video, and I know some of you might have been thinking that it was a review for the Blu-ray box set that just came out from Arrow. Unfortunately, it's not, because I don't have that box set, but I figured this ranking video is probably the next best thing. If you're new to my channel, I reviewed all 12 Gamera movies back in 2015 for the franchise's 50th anniversary. And since it's the 55th anniversary of the franchise, and, you know, new Blu-ray box set, I figured now would be the perfect time to rank all 12 Gamera movies, from the worst to the best. So for those of you who have never seen a Gamera film or aren't too familiar with the franchise, or you haven't seen my original reviews, which I do recommend you watch them, this is the video for you. So let's just get started right now. Number 12. Gamera Super Monster. I think every Gamera fan is in agreement that this is hands down the worst film of the franchise. This movie is to the Gamera franchise what All Monsters Attack is to the Godzilla franchise. Just nothing but a clip show of stock footage from the previous films. Except it's even worse this time around, because the plot involves an alien race coming to Earth, and they have an army of monsters that consists of all the monsters that Gamera has fought in the previous films. Which, when you hear that plot, it sounds cool, but when you watch the movie and realize that it's stock footage, it's criminal. It is unforgivable and ludicrous in all the wrong reasons that this is a Gamera clip show. The only new stuff that we get in terms of action scenes or Gamera is a really unconvincing Gamera prop that just does this the whole time. And it's embarrassing. And not to mention that this movie also rips off Superman to an extent, and even Star Wars, right down to the point where the alien ship is a Star Destroyer. Like, you had to wonder if Daiei was even sued over that, because it's a Star Destroyer. If you look at that thing, there's no getting around it. If I can say something nice about this film, if you've never seen any of the other Showa Gamera films and you just want to see all the monster stuff, then this might be the best film for you to watch. But at the same time, you'll probably get more out of seeing the movies as a whole rather than just condensed into a clip show. So, for that reason, this is easily the worst film in the franchise. Number 11. Gamera vs. Zegra. This is the 7th film in the franchise, and it actually came out the same year and the same month as Godzilla vs. Hedorah, July of 1971. And funny enough, both movies kind of revolve around an environmental message. But whereas Godzilla vs. Hedorah was unique and just bug nuts insane, Gamera vs. Zegra is just lazy and tired. The Showa Gamera series is known for just being out there and ridiculous, and Gamera vs. Zegra does have those moments, but they're very few in between. And if you watch these movies in a row like I did 5 years ago, this movie is just nothing but tired. The human characters flat out suck. The human plotline is just not interesting at all. It's terribly directed in terms of that aspect. And again, the monster stuff, while it can be enjoyed, there isn't a whole lot of it, and it's not too exciting. The best thing I can say about this movie is the monster Zegra. It's a really cool looking design, pretty much a space goblin shark. And hey, you can't go wrong with a goblin shark, or just sharks in general. But then again, Zegra can't save this film from being one of the worst of the series. Number 10. Gamera vs. Baragon. Not Baragon with an A, but Baragon with an O. There's a difference. Even if it's just one letter, there is a difference. In terms of the entire Showa era of Gamera, this movie's actually the most different and unique of the series, for better and for worse. The human plotline is actually more interesting than all the monster stuff. It's very well directed, it has a different tone to it than all the other films in the Showa era, and it actually can be exciting at points. And that's always a great thing when it comes to giant monster movies, is that if the human subplot is just as interesting as the monster stuff, then that could mean it's one of the better films of the series. But unfortunately, the monster stuff is not that interesting. The fight scenes between Gamera and Baragon are pretty much nothing. The monsters size each other up more than they actually do fight each other. In fact, Gamera is mostly absent in this movie, and when the movie's not focused on the human characters, it's mostly focusing on Baragon, which is an interesting and out there monster considering that it has a really long tongue that can freeze stuff. It shoots rainbows out of its back that can destroy things. It's an interesting taste to how crazy the other enemy monsters would be moving forward. So if you're looking for a Gamera movie that's a little more subtle and less crazy, then this might do it for you, at least in terms of the Showa era, but for me personally, I just don't recommend it. It's not really bad per se, it's just not one of my favorites. Number 9. Gamera vs. Geiger. One of the more interesting things about the Showa-era Gamera films is that they tend to be more violent and bloody compared to the Showa-era Godzilla films. And Gamera vs. Geiger is probably the most violent and the goriest of all the original Gamera films. It's got some really bloody moments throughout. It's a little more mature than the other Gamera films in this series. And it's got some really questionable scenes. There's a scene where we see documentary footage of an elephant's trunk being slit open and larvae spilling out. It's used to explain an element in the plot, but it's just downright gross. The way Gamera kills Geiger is pretty gruesome, but it's still a lot of fun if you go into this movie with the right mindset. Again, like Gamera vs. Baragon, it's not as wild as some of the other Showa-era films, but it's probably more accessible than Gamera vs. Baragon to me, or at the very least, more exciting. Number 8. Gamera vs. Virus. This is the movie that really set the Showa Gamera series on the track of being just insane and balls to the wall crazy. It's got everything you could expect from this kind of movie. Cheesy special effects, cheesy spaceships, an incredibly corny plot about aliens coming down to Earth and using monsters for their evil schemes, very similar to Invasion of the Astro Monster and Destroy All Monsters. But this movie can be incredibly entertaining, whether it's for intentional reasons or for incredibly unintentionally funny reasons. I mean, there's a reason why the Gamera series has always been a target for Mystery Science Theater 3000, and when you watch them, especially Gamera vs. Virus, you'll get a clear sense of that. There are some problems with this movie. The human characters are not interesting. There's a point where the movie just stops to show stock footage from the past 3 Gamera movies, since this is the 4th one. And while it goes on for 10 minutes straight, it feels like an eternity. But the real reason to watch this movie is for the final battle between Gamera and Virus. Virus is just a ridiculous looking monster, basically a giant space squid. And the way these two monsters fight is just a thing of beauty, especially the way Gamera officially defeats Virus. I won't say how for those of you who have never seen the movie, but if you watch that moment when Gamera is close to defeating Virus, it is one of the most confusing things you'll ever see in a motion picture. But it's definitely worth it. Number 7. Gamera the Giant Monster. The one that started it all. Now, I know what you probably are thinking, for those of you who are not familiar with the franchise. You can't do better than the first movie, and yet you put it at number 7? Gamera is one of those very rare cases where, yes, you can do better than the original. There's no denying that this film is Daiei's response to the success of the Godzilla franchise from Toho. And for the movie it is, it's actually competently made. It doesn't take its time to introduce Gamera. He is in the movie as soon as the credits start. The miniatures and special effects are very well done, and the way you get to learn about this monster as the movie goes on is rather interesting. And you realize that Gamera is just so unique compared to Godzilla. It is mostly common knowledge that Gamera flies, but for anyone who doesn't know of Gamera, that might come off as a complete surprise. What really brings this movie down are the human characters. They're not that interesting. None of the human characters in the Showa-era Gamera films are interesting. And Toshio, the little boy who loves Gamera, is such a nuisance because he tries to convince the Self-Defense Force and a lot of the other human characters to leave Gamera alone. Despite the fact that Gamera is killing people, Toshio does not care at all, and it would set a trend for the other films in the Showa era, for better and most certainly for worse. So the movie itself is just fine. It's competently made, and I would never say it's bad, but it's not that special of a movie. The legacy that this movie left behind is undeniable, but the movie itself is just kind of middle of the road. Number 6. Gamera vs. Giron. If there was ever one movie in the Showa Gamera series to really emphasize how bug nuts it can be, it's this one right here. It's got everything you want from a cheesy, riffable giant monster movie from Japan. It's got some really goofy looking sets with the spaceship, the alien planet that the two kids land on. Giron is one of the most ridiculous looking monsters I've ever seen, not just in the franchise, but within the genre period. And the fight scenes he has with not just Gamera, but the space Gyaos are just lunacy. Sometimes when Gamera and Giron fight each other, they look like two hand puppets, and they literally are. The fights move in slow motion. There are a lot of shots of the two monsters that just go on forever. I mean, it's so bonkers. It is so nuts and insane that it becomes enjoyable for that. So if you wanted the perfect Gamera movie that you can watch with friends and make fun of while be entertained at the same time, you can't do any better than Gamera vs. Giron. Number 5. Gamera vs. Gyaos. Despite everything I said about Gamera vs. Giron, if there was one Showa-era movie that I can recommend without the riff factor, it would be Gamera vs. Gyaos. Because while it planted the seeds of what the Showa Gamera series would be further down the line, it's actually a little more tame by comparison. There's no aliens, there's no goofy looking sets, there's no ridiculous looking monsters. Gyaos is a tame looking monster by comparison of some of the others. It's got some really unique powers. The fight scenes between him and Gamera are pretty entertaining. And there's a lot of unintentionally funny moments that don't border across being absolutely ridiculous like in Gamera vs. Giron. Once again, the human characters are not that interesting, and there is a human subplot in this film that kind of goes nowhere, and they just resolve it at the last second after abandoning it for the rest of the movie. So that part's not too strong, but all the monster action is pretty great, especially considering that this movie introduced the only Gamera enemy that would appear in other films. Number 4. Gamra the Brave. This is currently the latest Gamera film to be made, from 2006. There hasn't been one since. And this is a movie that I really didn't appreciate the first time I saw it. The first time I saw this movie in 2006, I just wasn't into it. I didn't like it all that much. And over time, the movie kind of grew on me. The best summary that I could give for this movie is that it's like E.T. or the Iron Giant, but with a giant monster in it. The relationship between the main kid and the baby Gamera Toto is very believable, it's sweet, it's heartfelt, and it might not reach the same levels as E.T. or the Iron Giant, but it definitely will leave an emotional impact in one way or another. And despite all that, the movie does a fantastic job with all the monster scenes that you expect from a movie like this. It's got some great special effects, the miniatures and destruction scenes are amazing to watch. And while Zetus might not be that interesting of a monster, it is a worthy foe to Gamera, and it's a lot of fun. The worst thing that I can say about this movie, and it's a pretty big negative, is that they replaced Gamera's iconic roar with some generic stock roar. And again, it's unforgivable and the biggest sin that this movie has ever committed. But if you can get past that, then you're in for a very special and definitely underappreciated monster movie when it comes to this genre. And now we're at the top 3, and any Gamera fan will tell you right off the bat that the top 3 movies in the franchise are the definitive top 3, which means that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to rank these films individually. But I know there's some people that want them ranked, so here's how I rank these movies. Number 3. Gamera, Guardian of the Universe. Before Shusuke Kaneko made Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack, and before Shinji Higuchi made Shin Godzilla with Hideaki Anno, both of them were involved in making Gamera not only relevant again, but giving him a movie that is on par with the best of the Godzilla franchise. If you looked at the Gamera franchise and thought it was too kiddie and too silly and ridiculous, then Gamera, Guardian of the Universe will make you interested in Gamera. It's like going from the 1960s Batman series to Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. It's a complete reboot of the franchise, not only changing the origins of Gamera, but also Gyaos, to the point where these two monsters are connected, and it truly makes Gyaos to Gamera what King Ghidorah is to Godzilla. The action scenes and special effects are spectacular. They are phenomenal and more well shot than any of the other films before. The score is fantastic and exhilarating. It's definitely darker and more mature in terms of its tone. The characters are great, and the cast in this film just does a spot-on job. It's definitely the movie that Gamera needed. And not only did it make Gamera more popular amongst older audiences, but it's also incredibly influential as well. If you watch Gareth Edwards' Godzilla from 2014, that movie focuses on the villain monsters, the Mutos, more than it does the hero monster Godzilla. Very similar to how Gamera, Guardian of the Universe focuses more on Gyaos than it does Gamera. So you can tell that Gareth Edwards was certainly influenced by this film when making Godzilla. Number 2. Gamera 2, Attack of Legion. I might find myself watching Guardian of the Universe more than Attack of Legion, but this movie takes all the stuff that was good in Guardian of the Universe and amps it up and makes it even better. The Gamera suit is more articulate, it's a much slicker design, and the enemy monster in this film, Legion, is not only cool, but incredibly threatening and poses a true menace to Gamera. Legion is one of those special effects wonders like Biollante, where it's not done through CGI at all. It is done through suitmation and animatronics, and it's one of the most complex monsters ever created, but somehow nothing went wrong, and Legion ends up being an incredible special effect. It's so articulate, it's got a ton of powers, and it's actually pretty scary at times. Once again, the human characters are great, the score is amazing, Shusuke Kaneko's direction's spot on, and I love the way this movie looks. It takes place during the winter, which not a lot of giant monster movies tend to do, and because of that, this movie just has a more magical feeling to it. It's really hard to explain, but I get a great winter feeling whenever I watch this film. And again, it's one of those things that a sequel should do, where it takes the first movie and builds upon it to make it better. Number 1. Gamera 3, Revenge of Iris. Not only is this movie one of those very rare instances where the third film in the trilogy is the best, but this movie is amongst the top 3 of giant monster films, right up there with Ishiro Honda's Godzilla. The reason this movie works more than any other film in the franchise is the story. The human plotline in this movie is very on point, it's very emotional, it's very dark, and it doesn't feel disconnected from the monster stuff. In fact, it depends on the monster stuff for the story to be as great as it is. And much like with Attack of Legion, everything that was good in that movie is done better in this one. Gamera has never looked better and will never look better than this interpretation. This is the first time Gamera's actually looked realistic. He's threatening, he's scary looking, but at the same time, he's still the Guardian of the Universe. He still protects humankind and the Earth. And this movie gets major points for having the final battle of the movie take place inside a building. It's very rare that you see a giant monster fight take place inside a building. And that's something that shouldn't work, but Shusuke Kaneko and Shinji Higuchi actually make it work. And while the final battle itself might not be as fast-paced as the first 2 films, it's definitely got the more emotional stakes. And it ends in a way where you want to see what happens next, but at the same time you don't want to because you know nothing could beat this movie. And for all that, that's why I say that Gamera 3 Revenge of Iris is not only one of the best monster movies of the genre, but hands down, the single best Gamera movie ever made. And there you go, that's my ranking of all 12 Gamera movies. And now I want to hear from you guys. How would you personally rank the Gamera movies? If you've never seen any of these films, are you at least interested to check them out now? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, leave a comment, support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until then, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.